Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be doing some stabilizing of rocks today. Specifically this is Varisite from Idaho. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the myths and misconceptions that people have about the stabilization of rocks. If you're not familiar, maybe you didn't see any of the other videos that I produced on this subject. Well, we have a vacuum chamber, we have some heat-activated resin, and well, rocks that we want to stabilize. We put them in the vacuum chamber with the resin. We pull a vacuum, pulling a lot of the air out of the chamber, out of the rocks. Once we get the majority of it out, we let the atmosphere come back in and it shoves that resin into any little cracks and pores of the rock. It is heat activated. So we take it over to the toaster oven, we bake it, and it solidifies this. Now, there's really two categories of stabilizing when it comes to rocks. There is what I've done the majority of, which is stabilizing rocks such as these for preventing the propagation of cracks. So, you know, in the case of this, which is some opal from here in Utah, what will happen with it is you will start to cut it on the trim saw, and little tiny micro fractures that are just on the surface will propagate into the inside of the rock. We can stop that with this process. Similar with this piece of fluorite here, that is one kind of thing where we have the prevention of cracks. Then you have more porous rocks that aren't necessarily going to crack under the vibration. That'd be things like your turquoise, varisite, where it's more of a porous stone, and we can make it nicer to work with by stabilizing it. In some of my previous videos on the subject, one of the things that came up a lot was people being like, I don't like plastic rocks. And it got me thinking, well, how much resin is really going into these, right? Like how much is getting shoved in? Now, for the stones that are doing stabilizing for crack propagation, anywhere from 0.5% to in the 4s. So on average, when I did I think I did 15 stones from the bubble opal claim here in Utah, I came out with an average of about 2%. But oh wait, that it picked up. We're going to be doing that same thing though today with some varisite. So I just changed the oil here in my vacuum. We're going to mix up a fresh batch of cactus juice, and I already went and used my very sensitive scale, and I took the weights of 8 of these stones, which are in this container here, and I took the weights of all of these littler pieces so we can have our starting point, and we can see how much weight these stones actually pick up. What I've learned using this cactus juice here, and from talking to people, the comments that people left on the videos about stabilizing, is that nobody read the paper that came with their cactus juice. People did not look at the technical data on the manufacturer's website, and they don't really get what's happening here. So, like I said, vacuum chamber, vacuum it, let the atmosphere shove the resin in, take it over to the toaster oven. We're going to preheat the toaster oven up to 200 degrees, and we're going to put the rocks in that toaster oven, and we need to bake them at, you know, we can go higher than 200. We're going to aim for like 210 or so. We're going to use a digital thermometer for that. And once these are up to 200 degrees on the exterior of the rock, we're going to bake them at that temperature for 2 hours. So at that point, we're going to call it good. Now, I don't necessarily want to put that little tub of rocks here into the bottom of this giant vessel. So one thing that you can do is you can use other containers. Now, this, I believe, so we are HDPE on the bottom. So HDPE, that is a high density polyethylene container. You might want a smaller container that goes inside your vacuum chamber. You can buy a high-density polyethylene container, or, well, you know what? You can find one. And in this case, we have an old isopropyl alcohol. This is a windshield wiper fluid container. They're a little expensive, to be honest with you. I mean, you can go spend $30 on a HDPE. That is important, HDPE. We want polyethylene, not polypropylene. This resin can actually eat through polypropylene, and we definitely don't want that. So that said, I'm going to cut these down so that I can kind of keep these a little separate here, and we'll mix this up. One of the things that I have found to be very interesting about the whole stabilizing thing is it comes up often, especially in the internet conversations, if you will, where people will be like, yeah, people just need to tell you that it's stabilized. You know, think about it like buying a stabilized stone. And the thing is, this costs money, very real money. I don't see anybody stabilizing stones and then trying to like pass them off as natural, because it's very obvious what you have there. And you want to recoup some of the money, you know. There's dyed, like in the world of turquoise, you have like halite that's dyed to be turquoise. You got plastic, you got resin, and then you have reconstituted stuff where it's just like straight dust that's pressed into a block. You have little pieces of turquoise that have been glued into a block, and then you have high grade, natural, super duper solid stuff. And the latter there, the high end, super solid stuff, well, it's extremely expensive. It's extremely expensive. And let's see if I got that in there. And you're probably not even buying it. You know, like, you know, the thing is, there's just a lot of money involved in this stuff. And everybody wants to talk down the thing that somebody else is doing while kind of like de facto talking up the thing that they're doing. You know, I'm trying to cut through all of that nonsense and just show you the facts, the data of it. So I think we're set here. We have to mix this. This is a two-part system. So you have your hardener, or well, is it the hardener, the activator, or whatever. We're gonna put some of the cactus juice in here, shake this up, and add it. Another thing that we can do with this is keep it in the fridge. So, you know, they want you to keep this below 85 degrees for, you know, storing purposes. Well, I'm going to keep it in the refrigerator. That's going to be the best for it. Am I fully shooken up enough here? I believe I am. And I got it all. This is also a reusable product, which is pretty cool. You know, what doesn't get pulled in, we put it back in the jug. So that's another reason why you want to keep it cool. We don't want to crystallize in the container. My vacuum chamber here is like the El Cheapo Amazon special. And you can see that my lid, which is a plexiglass lid, is crazing. Now it's still totally fine. It still gets, you know, airtight. There's no cracks all the way through, but you know, this is a relatively cheap setup. If you look at the setups that the company that sells the cactus juice has, they're way like easily double or more than this. I mean, they just sell the containers, and those are like $275 for some of them. No pump, you got to buy your pump. It gets pricey. I feel like this setup works just fine. These containers have plenty of headroom in them, so if it fizzes over, it's not going to go everywhere. But this will keep my different ones separated. Vacuum pump on, and then open the valve that's going to pull the air. So this goes to the vacuum pump. This one over here lets air back into the chamber. Keep that closed off. Then you might have to press it some, get it to fully seat. There we go. can see some bubbles coming out. I'm just going to turn this off for a minute so that we can chat. And the way you do it is you always close the valve first, and then you turn your pump off. And it's going to hold that pressure. It's still fizzing and bubbling inside here. And we don't need to run the pump constantly. These aren't rated to be a constant duty pump. It's more occasional, I guess you could say. So let me show you. This thing's still pulling air out. In the vacuum, still bubbling like crazy in there. And it will be for potentially a long time. When it comes to how long you need to be doing this, the general rule of thumb is you want to pull until there's no more bubbles coming out. That's not always doable for any number of reasons. But, you know, if it's like a light, like you see a little bubble come up, a little trickle, right? You're probably fine. And let's say that takes 3 days in the vacuum to get to that point. You're going to want to let it soak for double that. So once we let the atmosphere back in, let that atmosphere shove that resin into those stones. So I'm going to turn this on periodically throughout that period. You know, I can come out here, run it for 15 minutes or so, and it's the opposite. So vacuum pump on, open the valve. Probably set a timer on your phone so you don't forget about it. It's been about a little over 2 days. Got all of the air pulled out, no more bubbles coming out. I've tapped on it, done everything I can to kind of shake any loose bubbles out. And it's time to let the atmosphere back in. Yeah, so you can kind of see in there through all the crazing of the plastic lid. We'll let some air back in, nice and slow. We'll just let that thing go on down here. Look at that. Not bad. So now that we're done, we're letting that atmosphere shove that resin into all the nooks, crannies, porous bits of that varisite. I'm going to give it 3-4 days or so and just let that do its thing. You know, the varisite here, it's a phosphate, similar to turquoise in that it's in that kind of group, if you will, being a phosphate. You know, I think it's interesting. The whole conversation surrounding stabilization processes of resin, acrylic, all these different things, usually is in reference to turquoise and not so much crack propagation of opal, different things like that, or even varisite. I do think I want to get ahead a little bit of the people that might be like, I just don't like it. Estimates from different people, the guy that runs Turquoise in America, Mike Ryan, I believe at one point he said that about 80% of turquoise mined has to be stabilized. And, you know, it's stabilized for color, durability. I've seen estimates coming as high as 90%. All right, so imagine this for a second. You're just a guy with a claim, and you're mining turquoise. You get 1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds out of the ground in 1 year. Well, if 90% of it needs to be stabilized for you to anybody to do anything with it other than just being garbage, and you have 10% which is really hard, solid, good-looking, great material, and of that 10%, of that 100 pounds, you have another like 10%, like 10 pounds of rock. That's like the best of your finds. And usually that stuff doesn't even make it to market. That stuff goes straight into the hands of, you know, collectors that have built a relationship with mine owners. You're not even seeing that stuff for sale at shows in Tucson, quartzite, whatever. It's just like bypasses that whole thing. If that 90% of that 900 pounds of rock was not utilized in some way, all of that cost to get that tiny fraction of material would go through the roof, because you have to recoup the costs of this whole like mining, removing overburden thing. So, I mean, so long as this stuff is labeled, and who cares, right? Like, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But you should appreciate that it is some people's thing, because if they weren't buying that, well, you probably wouldn't be able to afford the natural turquoise, that top 10%, top 1%, if you will, of material coming out of the ground, because, well, all of those costs would have to get spread onto that smaller amount of material coming out of the ground. So I'm gonna let this stuff just sit here and chill. I'm pretty happy. I think we're gonna get some great results here before we head over to the toaster oven and give it a good bake. I will check back in with you in 4 days. It is time to bake our rocks, which this is exciting for me because we get to see how much resin these things absorbed. And no, really, try not to make a giant mess. Only make a small mess. Okay. Wow, these are very green. Kind of get some of the excess off, because we're going to reuse it, This might be a little tough to get these guys out. I'm going to actually dump them all in here. So you want to do this outside, of course. And I think we're at 200 now. Let some of the fumes out. Turn it down a little bit, and we'll start our timer. We are done with the stabilization baking. And these are the ones that we're going to weigh individually, and these are the ones we're going to weigh together. And I've been spending a ton of time chipping off some of the resin that pools on the back side of this. Because, if it's sitting down like this is the orientation in the tray, some of the resin from the surface pools underneath it. And if we're going to weigh these to try to get some accurate weights, I need to try to get off as much of this stuff as possible, because it does add up. And the idea is to have some pretty accurate numbers. I guess some will be on the surface here, as you can see it right there. And we'll just have to know that whatever the numbers come back as, it's actually slightly lower than that. So, time to do some math. I have the results here, and I must say I am surprised by them. So, these ones here, we separated them out. I weighed all of them, these 8, and I took the ending weight. I also have all of our little pieces here, all these little guys, and I weighed all of them together. And here are the results of that. Now you can see the starting weight, the finished weight, how much weight they gained, and then the percentage changed. And the percentage changed, if we average all of that out, is 1.8%. So they gained 1.8% of resin weight. And actually, keep in mind, it is lower than that because there is some on the exterior of the rock. Like, if you were to just like polish these, make a cab out of them, cut something or whatever, that's not going to be a factor. So it's actually less than that. So, it's interesting because the way in which people talk about stabilization is that you have now ruined your rocks and they are now a plastic rock. But when we look at some of this, and you're like 1.4%, up to 2.7%, or whatever, we'll just go with the average of 1.8%. So if I have something now that's, let's say, 1.8% resin, and that means I can take it over to my trim saw, and I can cut it, and there's no worry about like a little fracture peeling off. Or you can take it over to, you can take a piece like this over to like a cab machine, and there's no risk of where there's matrix like it's splitting. We've just solved all of those problems for ourselves. Now, when it comes to doing stone intarsia work, it really doesn't matter for me because obviously intarsia pieces have glue. So I'm looking at making stuff that is ultimate stable to work with. But yeah, I really thought the number was going to be significantly higher, like 5%, 10%. That's the way people talk about it. And at least what I'm finding is when stabilizing opal for crack propagation, when stabilizing at least Idaho variscite, we're seeing a very low percentage of gain happening. And I would assume as well that we would see something similar with turquoise. Obviously, I don't have any I don't have any unstabilized turquoise that requires stabilization. If I get some at some point, I'll probably recreate this test because I find it really fascinating to have some data points like this and kind of do a little bit of myth busting. And to say the least, I would not say these are plastic rocks. You let me know your thoughts on it down below. Thank you for being here. Go check out the website, currently rockhounding.com, and I will catch you in the next video.